With Hybernating 2 releasing in a couple months, I thought why not speculate on what this game could be with the information currently available, with an added bonus theory on who Cassie's dad might be. So let's just jump straight into it. When will Hybernating 2 take place in the timeline? From the teaser trailer, we got a look at the sister location Elevator as well as Blora. From Dorko's early gameplay video, we got a look at the breaker room from sister location Whack-a-Bon, a level where we'll be playing a FNAF themed whack-a-mole, and a carousel level with Moon. With sister location and security breach themed locations and characters in Hybernating 2, I think it's given that the game will probably take place before the events of security breach, but at least before Ruin, as Moon is an active player and not Ruined Moon or Eclipse. However, the reason why I believe the Hybernating 2 to happen before security breach is for one reason: the carousel level. A carousel very similar to this appears in a Tales from the Pitaplex story, Claustrophobia, a ride that once was a part of the Pitaplex before security breach, as it doesn't appear in the SB. This would be good evidence for Hybernating 2's placement if you believe Tales to be fully canon to the games, as I do. If not, take Moon's condition as evidence instead. Though it is possible that Hybernating 2 is another VR game in universe just like the first Hybernating was, then the attractions in the game wouldn't really give us an exact point the game takes place, though it really doesn't matter for the exact time and placement for Hybernating 2 to take place. But I would argue that it does to an extent. This brings us to our next point, that being what Hybernating 2 will be. Aside from it being another VR game in universe, another possibility I've seen is that the game could be a training simulator for technicians working in the Pitaplex or in other Fazbear tech-related projects. While I don't know the origin of this theory, I will have Entom on Twitter credited for it in the video because that's why I saw the theory first. I believe this theory could be true based on what we've seen of the game. 2 of the 3 levels are technician related, those being the breaker room with Funtime Freddy and us repairing the carousel. The only exception is the Whack-a-Bon game being, well, a game you would probably play at the Pitaplex. Maybe playing the game would be playtested in it after you repair or ensuring functionality, like in Claustrophobia, where Grady, a Fazbear technician for the Pitaplex, and the main character had to climb through tubes in Blora's fitness and flex and exercise venue to test out and see if the structures and Blora were in optimal condition, which resulted in him getting stuck in the tubes, and Blora, following her programming, helps him out by pulling on his limbs to get him out. But because of the incredibly tight space in the tube, Blora's effort led to his limbs being crushed and pulled from their sockets. Because Fazbear wasn't smart enough to put a failsafe in her programming, obviously it's Fazbear, they're comically incompetent, which is why Blora's fitness and flex isn't a location during security breach. But the main takeaway from this is that Grady was a technician who had to play test and troubleshoot rides and attractions in the Pitaplex, so Whack-a-Bon being a part of a Fazbear tech training in a VR simulation wouldn't be out of the question. Which, if this is true, then could add on to the carousel ride being an indicator to the game's placement in the Pitaplex era. Because why would you keep a ride that is no longer at the Pitaplex as a part of their training? But hey, that's admittedly a weak argument. Maybe it's there so employees are prepared for future attractions. But even so, the fact that we will be getting more sister location levels as the teaser was sister location themed means that we will most certainly get more technician type levels, as Mike was hired as a technician in sister location, added onto the training simulation theory. Another idea is that Hybernating 2 would be a game set in the real world, as the sister location bunker could be under the Pitaplex too if the Pitaplex was originally Fredbear's. However, because the first game was a VR simulation, I fear it would be an odd choice for the sequel to it to not also be a VR simulation. Then again, this point could be used for the idea Hybernating 2 would be another VR game in universe, as another cover-up title for Fazbear after the Pitaplex. Though with them having already done this before, and very recently, I also can't see Fazbear attempting to do the same trick again and it working as well as it did the first time. But who knows, maybe it would. The general public in FNAF are very gullible. So I believe that Hybernating 2 will be a VR tech training simulation for the Pitaplex employees, and if the carousel ride is any indicator to the game's time placement, then maybe we'll see Tiger Rock, the version of the Mimic 1 program which infected the Pitaplex before the Glitch Trap variant entered its systems, thanks to our good old friend Patient 46. Speaking of technicians, wasn't Cassie's dad one?
A Faz wrench. It's just like my dad's.
Now, originally, when Ruin initially released, I didn't think Cassie's dad would play much importance in the story, but in hindsight, I could be wrong. Throughout Ruin, we set up some interesting pieces of information of Cassie's dad, including he may no longer be in Cassie's life, be it because he's missing or because he is no longer alive, as the text on all the collectibles mentioning him are in the past tense. We also learned that his favorite animatronic was Bonnie, and he collected old memorabilia collectibles from Fazbear. Am I about to say that he is the Bonnie bully from FNAF 4? No, I'm not. Simply because the timeline doesn't match up for him to be Cassie's father, maybe grandfather, but I will not be going any further with that idea. Another possibility is that Cassie's dad could be Michael Afton, and while this does have some evidence going for it, like him being a technician in the past, his dad's association with bunnies, Remnant healing him and keeping him alive, to have a family, and a hexadecimal code for purple backwards on the back of Cassie's Fazwrench 395248, saying her dad had one as she picks up the Fazwrench. Though, to stick with the same argument I made before about the Bonnie bully, Mike too would be too old to be Cassie's father. Plus, I don't see why Bonnie of all the Fazbear characters would be Mike's favorite, given William's association with the Spring Bonnie character. Would be too reminiscent of the father he once had, so I'm gonna have to give Mike being the father a hard no. So, who is Cassie's dad then? I don't think we've met him yet, but I think we will soon, in Hub Wanted 2. I believe the protagonist for this game will be Cassie's dad. He was a technician, and given the multiple mentions of him in Ruin, it's possible that the DLC was setting him up for their future game. Though I also think he is more important than that. This part of the video is inspired by a portion of Rye Toast's podcast where he brings up the idea that Cassie's dad could have been helping in replicating Afton's experiments. And honestly, I agree. What made me come to this conclusion was the code on Cassie's Fazwrench. This is something that has bothered me since it was discovered. Why is it here? And this video hit me. I believe this is the reason why the code is on the back of the Fazwrench, because Cassie's dad was involved with replicating Afton's experiments for Fazbear. Under the pizza place, we have a scuba room reminiscent to sister locations with a bunch of equipment with the Pizzaplex's logo printed onto them, and spoilers for Didophobia in the 8th Tales book, if you haven't read it yet. We have hints to them potentially replicating the nightmare experiment, which is the explanation to the FNAF 4 nightmares. The character named Rory was kidnapped at the age of 7 and was trapped in these experiments for 10 years in a constant loop, being fed Rofflers and having very little sleep, where he discovers the source of his nightmares as hallucinogenic gases, with records being kept of his experiences. Hints of these experiments in Security Breach lie with the child in the hospital bed, the Endo daycare area, the Nightmarion plush in Security Breach being labelled as Nightmare plush, and the Nightmarion staff bots with the message "In your dreams." Even the gas ejected out of Burntrap's pod could be nightmare gas, explaining the mimic's appearance as Burntrap in Security Breach, but I don't even want to get into that. If Cassie's dad was replicating the experiments, then this would explain why Cassie's Fazwrench has the iconic FNAF 3's code for purple on the back as a hint towards his work, as color associations are now, in my opinion, related to thematic symbolism rather than individual characters, as seen with the Mimic. Add this with Cassie's dad's favorite animatronic as Bonnie, then that Afton association is made even stronger, though I'll also add a better reason for the code being engraved in the back of a random Fazwrench was because Fazbear had a whole team of people involved with the experiment replications. Maybe there were different versions of the Fazbear Tech training course for those selected to be a part of the special experiment program, as we will be going into the sister location bunker in the simulation where the FNAF 4 experiments were conducted. But I'm just throwing that last part out there as a random thought I had. However, could it be possible that Cassie is a protagonist? This was my initial thoughts after Ruin, with the chip already in her head and digital and real worlds being distorted and the Mimic connected to the Vanny mask. I figured that Hub Wanted 2 would be the continuation of Ruin's story, where Cassie is fighting against the Mimic's attempts to invade her mind, ending with her escape or becoming the next Vanny. With the game continuing where Ruin left off and it being a simulation, it would make sense. And while I do see this as a possibility, with the evidence presented in the video, I think us playing as Cassie's dad in the training simulations has more going for it, regardless of his importance for the overarching story with experiments or a random technician. Well, that about wraps up the video. I hope you enjoyed, and you're always welcome to let me know what you thought even if you disagree, and consider subscribing and liking for more FNAF related content in the future. And if you want, I have a Twitter you could follow me on @SethAnxiety. Thanks and enjoy your day/evening.